Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Data Standard Audio Experience. Today, I have Andy Gray, the co-founder and CEO of Cortical. And today, we're speaking about automation tools. So, welcome to the show, Andy. It's so great to have you today.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Could you tell the audience just more about your background and go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Andy Gray. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Cortical, and it's a platform to accelerate supervised machine learning. So we started back in 2014, looking at a single machine learning problem, and that was in lead optimization for call centers. And like the results were really good, but we just found out that we couldn't do that many POCs because it took us like 3 months to do each POC. So, every data set was different, all the different features, all the different data types. So we started really automating those processes as much as possible. And that automation became the foundation of like the Cortical platform. So, given that so much changes from data set to data set in terms of all those data types and data sizes, we actually found that like once we'd solved it for that problem, and then we went to different industries like banking and things like that, we found that actually it was hugely applicable across loads of industries, from Deloitte Tax to National Health Service and telco, and actually even predicting cow sizes in agriculture.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And automation tools are really huge, especially in the data science industry. But you had mentioned to me offline that just 50% of data scientists don't like to use these automation tools. So could you just tell us why is that?
Yeah, so that's like a stat from Gartner, and I think that for years we've had almost all the data science tools and platforms that were talking about like replacing data scientists or saying that sort of anybody can be a data scientist, the citizen data scientist, And I think for anybody who's had to work on real machine learning problems or working with real data sets, they're usually far from perfect, and that's just the case. So model tuning, feature engineering and model selection, they're only a small part of the process and what, a real data scientist ends up doing. And so, mapping the data onto the domain and, basically interpreting things like, F1 scores or AUCs. And that's something you really kind of need some specialization to understand. So I think the sort of, it's this dream, this myth has been sold about like all these people are going to suddenly start doing all this data science work. And I think that's kind of alienated a lot of the real data scientists. And I think sort of, while data scientists can actually use the citizen data science platforms, and they'll probably see a bunch of the benefit in terms of speed, most of these platforms in their attempts to be really easy to use have chosen the route of being like really simple, or choosing the best standard solution rather than giving a range of options or actually letting them do something custom. So when they've hidden away all these details, the data scientists become like a little bit of a passenger in the process. So it's more of a driverless solution rather than something that they're really in control of. And I think that sort of it's this lack of transparency and control is what we think is fundamentally holding back a lot of the adoption, or for data scientists wanting to adopt these tools. And so basically that's sort of something that Cortical set as its mission to do really differently, to really kind of embrace that. And then basically, like, if you take the average data scientist and said, would you mind if we automated your data pipeline process? So, you'll still be able to change everything, but, you're not going to have to, they're not going to beg you to basically write another data pipeline process where you have to do normalization around some numeric columns for a new data set. That's just, they'd love to be able to just outsource that work, but they just need the ability to change the bits that are non-standard. So it's basically kind of, if you've got something that takes you 90% of the way there, but then you still have to change the last 10%, and you just can't change the original thing, you have to kind of throw that whole thing away and start from scratch. So, that doesn't really work. And it's sort of the same thing if you ask data scientists, would you like the ability to run a distributed, machine learning solution search scalably on the cloud? They're not going to say no. They just want to be able to change whatever is produced. So I think it's this whole thing about actually just giving people the control. I think that's our whole take on it, basically.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It would be annoying to have to start with something and then have to start all over again once you find out you can't do that last 10%. That definitely makes sense. And how do you think these automation tools can be improved and changed in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the key is really putting the data scientist at the center of your thinking. So I think it's not really about automating creation of a good enough model, or making a tool so automated that the data scientist doesn't have to do anything and can chill out while the machine does its thing. As with almost any good machine learning use case that we have right now, the machine might be able to do 90% of the job, but it really needs the human touch to get that last 10% to get the best results. And our thinking is it's more about treating the data scientists like, a Renaissance master from the old times. So, it's basically, we got to provide them with the workshop. So they should be able to get detailed into detailed insights into what's going on. They should be able to see, what's going on at every stage of the process, add their flourish, change everything. But they should have hundreds of workers going off and doing most of the legwork in the background for them, sort of thing. So sort of, trying to, do that sort of empowering thing. So, and actually that's one of the key things we think is different. You got these terms like AutoML and driverless that everybody uses when they're talking about the tools and platforms that replace data scientists. So we kind of coined this term accelerated ML to describe the types of tools that are focused on empowering data scientists to get the best of man and machine.
Yeah, definitely. And can you tell us about any specific projects that you've used data just to improve your company overall?
Yeah, I mean, a pretty cool project that we're working on right now is basically predictive maintenance with for cars with Ford. So, these days cars have loads of sensors, and they're basically able to transmit that information about sort of like what's going on, the various different motors and all these different processes. And basically they beam that back to base. And so the idea is that sort of, using Cortical, you could build a whole rapid set of different models that can predict different failure modes in advance. And so that means that you can basically pre-order the parts, you can get the car serviced before anything happens, and that can save customers a lot of frustration from not having actually experienced the breakdowns on the road. So it's kind of like the good version of Minority Report, where you're where you're actually using the ability to predict the future for like positive outcomes for people. So I'd say one of the killer use cases for machine learning right now is back office automation. So that's basically where you've got a process that already deals with digital data. So something like emails or decision making or insights generation. So, so much of this work is incredibly routine. There's usually like a huge amount of turnover for this kind of repetitive job. So like no one actually likes to sit there and kind of tick through a million files and go, yeah, no. So, by leveraging machine learning, you can really increase worker happiness because you can basically automate a whole chunk of the really routine work. And then basically the people get to focus on more interesting cases. So you actually end up where you've got like more productivity coming out, you've got increased worker happiness and overall better quality of service. So I think, that's really one of the top use cases for AI right now.
Yeah, that's super interesting, all of the work that you're doing right now. And specifically for your line of work as a CEO, what do you think is your favorite part about your job right now?
That's a tough question. I think I really love that we had this sort of crazy idea about building an AI company back when nobody was doing it, and that we've actually helped companies create some really cool applications for machine learning. So I think sort of feeling like we're part of creating the future is that's pretty cool. But day to day, I think like probably the biggest highs come from working with the customer. So basically it's like we sift through customer feedback, we come up with something that we think they're going to love, and then we work on it, we put all that time and effort into it, we do a bit of testing, and then we put it out there. And then if they tell us they love it, it's amazing. It's like the best feeling in the world. Though sometimes you put it out there and you do that whole nervous anticipation, and the first users come in, and then you just realize like you didn't make the button bright enough for something, and then nobody uses it, and that can be like a horrible letdown. But I think day to day it's probably got to be working with a great team on something that we're all really passionate about.
Yeah, and that's super interesting to think about is the thinking about it as improving the future as well, since data science is a much more newer field still today. So that's an interesting way to think about it. And I wanted to also kind of just stray away from talking about all of just the tech and the work that you're doing and just talk about any hobbies that you have that you're just doing on the side. Have you been able to pick up anything during this time of just COVID-19 when everything is kind of still remote? Any interests that you've been doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was sort of like I'd taken up tennis, and I was loving tennis for a while, but then they basically kind of like locked down the tennis court. So I think like UK is maybe a bit more restricted than the US. So I kind of like became massively immobile. But basically the tennis courts have opened back up now, so that's been kind of fun to go back there. And then I sort of like I'm just a massive space fan, so I just love like all the stuff that's been going on, sort of like the SpaceX with their new Starship launches, the Perseverance rover, and the first helicopter on Mars with Ingenuity. So I think, yeah, like tracking all that stuff's been kind of fun.
Yeah, that's super fun. And how long have you been playing tennis for? I also play tennis.
Oh, basically about a year, so not not long.
Yeah. Come to the US and then one day after quarantine ends, we can both play.
Yeah.
Um,
I've got a bad feeling you'll crush me, but
well, yeah, thanks so much for being on the show. And I just want to talk about the data standard. We're trying to build a community where everyone can just come together and network with each other. So, what's something that we could do for you?
Yeah, no, it'd be like, amazing if you guys could actually just check out the platform. You can sign up to the exploratory data analysis right on the site, or you can basically, if you want to try out everything with the completely new take on feature engineering, explainability, and all that sort of stuff, you can just request that on our site too. And I mean, if you really want to get involved, then basically joining our Slack community, and then so we can just basically pump you with the new updates and get lots of feedback. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, perfect. And where can everyone find you online?
Yeah, so you can find us at cortical.com, or you can find us on LinkedIn, just look for Cortical, or on Twitter, it's at cortical underscore. So, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And to our audience, for more information on the data standard, you can find us at www.datastandard.io. Thank you so much, Andy, for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was great.